The rapid expansion of hyperscale data centers is an environmental justice and human rights issue. A data center is simply a physical building that houses large computer systems. A hyperscale data center is the largest of its class and can handle significantly more workloads with storage capacities to match, but they require substantially more electricity and water to operate and cool their facilities down. This map shows current data centers and prospective data centers in the US. The green dots represent existing data centers, the yellow are under construction, and the blue are prospective data centers. As you can see, within the next couple years, there will be a significant increase in data centers in the US. This is due to the unprecedented growth in cloud computing, streaming services, e-commerce, social media, online services, but most notably, artificial intelligence. It is estimated that there will be 65 new data centers constructed each month in 2026 to 2020 to 2030, which is substantially more than the average of seven between 2010 and 2025. These facilities are also 5 times larger. Previously, they were averaging about 21 megawatts, and now they're exceeding 100 megawatts. The largest hyperscale data centers will actually be between 1,000 to 2,000 megawatts, so a huge difference in their capacity. Um, in 2025, the total electricity that was produced by data centers was estimated to be around 6%. That number is expected to double or triple by 2028, averaging between 12 to 18% of the total electricity produced in the US. This rapid expansion is an environmental justice issue because rural communities, lower income communities, and tribal nations are disproportionately affected by the development of these data centers, both socially, economically, and environmentally. Data centers are often constructed in these rural areas because sometimes there are already pre-existing facilities, so they don't have to reconstruct or start from scratch, so to speak. But other than that, if they do have to build from the ground up, land is usually considered cheaper, as well as their operating costs are less expensive. So that's especially appealing to developers. In addition, these areas are considered to be slightly cooler compared to their urban neighbors. Even that couple degree difference in temperature can save quite a bit of money when it comes to cooling costs. So, of course, that's another big factor that makes these hyperscale data centers being developed in rural communities more appealing. But economically, these communities have significantly more or limited resources, and political and economic power is significantly reduced in order to participate in decision making. So often these communities are informed that data centers are going to be developed after the contracts have already been negotiated and signed. Yet these communities are the ones that are going to be primarily responsible for bearing the weight and the burdens of these centers being so close in proximity to them. This is actually very true for my community and happened here where I live. So that's really what sparked my interest in wanting to learn more about data centers and the environmental and human impacts that they can have. Environmentally, hyperscale data centers lead to increased electricity demands, which may require costly upgrades for small local or small rural communities. They also are known to deplete groundwater because it takes millions of gallons of water to cool these huge facilities down each day. This is especially concerning for rural communities that are primarily in like the agricultural and farming, because they're going to now be competing for their limited or strained water sources with these data centers. Certain water facilities are not in a position to handle that kind of increase in demand of water. So they would require costly upgrades. And often these upgrades, both with the electricity and with water demands, come at the cost of the facility, or not the facility, the community. Um, so they are already on average lower income than their, urban counterparts, but they're the ones that have to face these tax increases or utility increases to support these new developments. Socially, the health impacts could potentially be very severe. Hyperscale data centers are ran off of fossil fuels and diesel fuels, which pollute the air, impacting climate change, and also have significant health risks like cardiovascular and respiratory disease, cancer, neurological disorders, asthma, premature mortality, and significant complications with women's reproductive health. Noise pollution is also another concern because these facilities produce a pretty continuous hum that can be heard for many miles. Although that sounds just kind of annoying, having this kind of noise pollution has actually been linked to decreased quality of life and increased risk for stress-related disorders. This poses a human rights issue due to the potential negative health outcomes and because we have a right to clean water and clean air. Though this is not explicitly listed in our Constitution, there is legislation like the Clean Water, Clean Drinking Water, and Clean Air Acts that have been passed that show that environmental protections are essential for health and well-being. Immediate action is needed to reduce the environmental and human impacts of these hyperscale data centers. There have been two policies in place that could potentially help with this, although there isn't actually any specific hyperscale data center policies that have currently been passed. This is a new development and is really in the forefront of discussion right now between policymakers and the legislature. Um, but there are two policies that I reviewed that could potentially evaluate hyperscale data centers and their developments. The first was the National Environmental Policy Act, and the second was the Minnesota Environmental Policy Act. So these are kind of like sister policies, so to speak. But the national one is really limited to only federal agencies, while the Minnesota Act is oversees all the developments in the state of Minnesota. So the federal act is only going to look at what they consider major developments. So that's another huge limitation because if there's a smaller data center, but still on that hyperscale like spectrum, so to speak, they wouldn't be required to undergo the same types of evaluations. But the Environmental Act, both of them are essentially designed to require developers to evaluate the economic, social, and environmental impacts of their developments, which could be that of hyperscale data centers, even though it's not like explicitly outlined. There is significant barriers to this, though. It is just basically to get them to do the evaluation so they can make informed decisions regarding their developments. Neither policy actually requires them to make any changes if there are significant negative consequences that are found in these evaluations. So essentially, they're not doing a whole lot. You can hope that these developers are going to do the right thing and try to find more environmentally friendly or more efficient means to, operate their new development, but it's not required for them to do that. A more appropriate route would be for legislation to be passed similar to that of the data moratorium bill, which requires a comprehensive evaluation be completed prior to the development or construction of any data center, which would weigh the economic, social, and environmental impacts. Unfortunately, this bill never made it past the initial introductory reading here. But similar legislation is being proposed throughout the entire nation in most of the states are understanding the significant impacts that data centers can have. So they're wanting to pass legislation to ensure that these policies are or these developments are equitable and sustainable while encouraging energy efficient and economic stability for the communities that would be impacted. So I definitely recognize my own values and experiences have influenced how I feel about data centers, especially because I'm going to be directly impacted. We have a data center being constructed right outside of my community. And unfortunately, we were not notified of this until after all plans were developed, and that is really common and happens a lot with these constructions. They locate them just outside of city limits, so they don't have to meet the same requirements if they were inside like another business would. So there are definitely loopholes that they're using to, push these developments forward. Um, I, you know, I understand my side of it and my concerns of it, but it is also significant when it comes to environmental and human right concerns, and that warrants advocacy. Um, you know, Everybody, including residents and stakeholders and policymakers alike, should have informed or should be informed on these developments so they can make these informed decisions to ensure that the development of these hyperscale data centers are equitable for all and that they maintain or sustain our environment and protect our ecosystem. So I definitely believe that my approach is justice informed because it considers diversity and the unequal impacts hyperscale data centers have on rural communities, low-income communities, and tribal nations. Although I'm a little bit pessimistic to think that advocacy could make a difference in my community since everything's already been passed and is kind of set in motion, I don't feel like it's too late to advocate for other developments that are coming up in our state and throughout the country. The information that I use or that I found can definitely be used to inform residents and policymakers, stakeholders, finding ways to just get the word out. Um, having these Having this information can help make informed decision about prospective data centers, which would be huge to prevent, economic decline, environmental decline, and all these health risks. So I definitely feel like hyperscale data centers we're going to be hearing more about them coming. So I hope you found this information to be interesting and useful. Thank you.